Can you guess who that was or who they were? Welcome home, HMCS Fredericton. They arrived back a couple of days ago, I think they came back. I lose track of the time, but I just want to take this opportunity to welcome them all home, and I hope they have, I'm glad they're back on Canadian soil, and I hope that they have a good rest, a well-deserved rest, and thank you so much for your service, for all that you did during your operations and all that you've been through. Just know that we all back here in Canada, we're awaiting your arrival and have been thinking about all of you and your families, and we're glad that you're back. My name is Lisa White, and I'm the Health Promotion Manager at 14 Wing Greenwood, and welcome to my Thursday morning short. Before I get started, I wanted to do a shout out to Edith Tremblay. Hi, I see you there. Edith is our, Jeanette and I's admin assistant, and yesterday it was her birthday, and we're going to be celebrating that today. So happy belated birthday, Edith, and thank you for all that you do for us. We've been celebrating 18 birthdays. Wow, we're almost ready to leave home. So happy belated birthday, and we'll see you later this afternoon for some pizza. A little disclaimer before I get started. Just to let you know that this information is the property of National Defense, and it is for military members and the defense team, and it is not to be duplicated or used for any other purposes than education and information. And we tailor to an audience that is 18 years of age and over. So parental it's really not a parental guidance. This is really just for people who are 18 years old and age and older. The topic this morning is things that can help when coping with operational stress injuries. So just to give you, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown of what operational stress injuries are, and then I'm going to get right into the things that can help when coping with operational stress injuries. So in the beginning of all of this, we've done a variety of different videos. Jeanette just did a video last week on resilience. I've done some on mental fitness. And so when we take a look at the broader picture, so when you take a look at mental health, mental fitness, underneath that umbrella, you'll have mental illness, and then you'll have operational stress injuries. And that term was coined for the men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces. So the Canadian Armed Forces face unique stressors when deployed on combat, conflict resolution, and peacekeeping missions. Whether they are in Canada or abroad, Canadian Armed Forces members are isolated from their normal personal support systems. They may adapt quickly to new routines and circumstances, and they may be away from their normal lifestyles, but they often witness terrible human tragedies, at times being so close to danger that they too may be injured or killed. An operational stress injury is a persistent psychological difficulty resulting from operational duties performed by a Canadian Armed Forces member. The term OSI, which is the short form for operational stress injuries, is used to describe a broad range of problems which usually result in impairment of functioning. Operational stress injuries include diagnosed medical conditions such as anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as a range of less severe conditions, but the term OSI is not intended to be used in a medical or legal context. Injuries caused by operational stress and trauma have always been part of warfare. These are the wounds not caused by a direct enemy projectile or explosive, as a textbook says, but those that injure the mind or the spirit. These wounds can too be fatal. Doctors with fighting units have been describing what we call the psychological effects of soldiering ever since the dawn of modern medicine in Europe. The first medical paper on the subject was published in 1678. Its author observed anxiety, depression, disturbed sleep, and insomnia, and severe enough to lead, when not dealt with, to madness or mysterious death. It was only the vast scale of the First World War, however, which forced medical establishments to confront the treatment and rehabilitation of operational stress injuries. Doctors have been engaged with this issue ever since, so that's just sort of a little bit of history behind that. Sometimes known as the invisible injury. So some signs to think about. But before we get to signs of operational stress injuries, they talk about 4 categories. So they talk about trauma, grief, moral injuries, and fatigue. So those would be sort of 4 areas of where, you know, medical professionals, medical officers, psychologists, and those would explore those 4 different areas to see, you know, where the OSI sits within those 4 different categories. And there's some signs to consider. My main focus today is going to be on things that can help when coping with operational stress injuries, but I think it's important to sort of take a look at some of the signs that might indicate that somebody could potentially be suffering from an OSI. We talked a lot about mental fitness early on, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, and when we talked about mental fitness, we talked about the mental health continuum model, we talked about our resiliency, we talked about all the different types of behaviors that could indicate where somebody's mental fitness could be struggling, right? And we talked about those 4 different categories of the healthy, reacting, ill, and injured. So if you're not quite sure or familiar with the mental health continuum model, take a look back at that video on mental fitness and get a little bit more background, and then maybe watch this live post again, and it might give you a better understanding of sort of what you're looking for. It's very difficult to measure our mental health sometimes. Sometimes we can feel our physical health a little bit more than we can feel it when our mental health is deteriorating. So they put that mental health continuum model together to look at behavior, so we could look at that and get an indication of where we could be falling within those 4 categories. So when I give you some of these signs to look for when it comes to operational stress injuries, these could be some signs that could be coming from other areas as well. So it's very important that if you're hearing some of these things and they sort of resonate with you and they sound familiar to you, that you would explore these with your medical officer or professional, okay? So some of the signs that we tend to see when somebody's suffering from an operational stress injury, while many things can contribute to the development of an operational stress injury, even the most obvious factors have no predictable cause and effect timeline. For example, the OSI risk to a Canadian Armed Forces member increases significantly with the sudden violent death of other personnel or of people who are nearby. This is especially true when the member involved also comes close to death themselves. Soon after, he or she may suffer confusion, withdrawal, anger, and emotional exhaustion. Most, though, continue to function quite well during the deployment, but may encounter difficulties upon returning home. So in general, this usually happens weeks or even months later in the form of reoccurring memories, daydreams, nightmares, flashbacks that can cause the individual to relive the trauma. Operational stress injury sufferers can startle easily, be hyper alert, and have trouble sleeping. Also, because various sights, sounds, smells, people, and places will unexpectedly remind them of an event, they may act erratically in trying to avoid painful triggers. Other people could be sensitive to smells, sight, sounds, people, and places that remind them of the event. Many act erratically in trying to avoid painful triggers sometimes. So esprit de corps can sometimes be a double-edged sword for some people. We know that when we talk about protective factors for military members, when it comes to mental health and esprit de corps and things like that, esprit de corps is actually one of those protective factors. Esprit de corps is that unit cohesion and being part of a unit, part of a team, working together, supporting each other. Esprit de corps can be a good thing, but for some reserve members or for people who go into a deployment, who are going there temporarily, sometimes the esprit de corps that's within the unit, sometimes it's very tight already. So when they come into a deployment and they're only there temporarily, sometimes they find it very difficult to be included into that unit because they've been so close and working so close together that sometimes they feel isolated and excluded. And that could sometimes lead to somebody suffering from an operational stress injury. You also have to look at, too, when military members are on deployment, they're also in very close quarters for a long period of time. So that can also contribute to a high level of stress for military members. And when you look at them being away on deployment, you're also looking, like I talked about before, you're looking at the whole environment. So you're looking at the taskings that they're doing. You're looking at the altitude, the climate, the sleep, the conditions, the food, the being away from those social supports. Sometimes in some deployments, there could be some times when things are very boring and the periods of very low downtime, and people can then heighten their stress levels because they're thinking of home and family and missing the people, the loved ones from far behind, right? So it's not necessarily always the things that people see or see. It's also the things that people are experiencing while they're on a deployment or in operations. Also, too, everybody's very individual, so for some people it's very hard for them to adapt to their surroundings when they get out onto a deployment, right? So if some people are very introverted and very private person, and they're out on a deployment and they're in very close quarters and they're around a lot of people and they're in crowds, and I always think of Afghanistan sometimes. I had a friend who went over there, and she told me about when they go to have meals. So they're going into these places where there's a whole different variety of nationalities of places where you can eat, and there's a lot of people there, and it's crowded, and it can be very stressful for some people, right? So sometimes just living that type of behind the wire and all that kind of stuff can be very difficult for people as well. So when people are, okay, so here, yeah, sorry, I got distracted. I was moving a little too far ahead of myself. Another things to consider for Canadian Armed Forces members, they're often required to perform tasks which place them in harm's way, as we know this. This generalization does not fully describe the complex nature of today's operations. Consider the feelings of Canadian Armed Forces members who are unable to prevent situations which not only endanger their own lives, but will prove fatal to others who are less advantaged. So then you're starting to look at that whole moral injuries as well. Such situations may easily result in guilt over the fate of those they try to help when measured against their own standard of living and the quality of life back at home. I worked a second job in Cleves, and I can remember people coming in who've come back from their deployment, and they were listening to kids complaining about the shoes that their kids were picking out and saying, I want these ones, and I want the bigger, more expensive ones, and I want this hockey stick that's $300. And I can remember some of them just having a really hard time grasping the concept of how that looks like here now when somebody has been over somewhere else where they're seeing people who are struggling in other different ways just to survive with food and shelter and things like that. So they struggle with those moral, it's morally struggling for some of those people when they come back, right? Alternatively, there may be extreme distress afterwards for not experiencing immediate compassion, mainly because they preserved what some might call strategic objectivity during a crisis. I'm reading a lot today because I don't want to get this wrong. I want to make sure that I'm covering this properly. When I get into the coping pieces, I'll be able to live a bit more. So we're going to get into returning home, and then we're going to get into what I really want to talk about, and that is sort of what can we do if we are struggling with an operational stress injury. So it is key when they return home. It's a key period. It is most often in interaction with family, friends, and those who did not deploy that makes a member's personal experiences stand out. This can quickly produce feelings of isolation, especially if it is perceived that a valued support system such as a family and friends does not appreciate, recognize, or understand the Canadian Armed Forces members' difficulties. So not being able to relate to each other when they come back, not knowing what that person has seen, and then coming in home and they're not understanding what's going on. They don't see what they saw, or they're not able to talk about it and share that with them. And so that understanding and that is not there, that compassion is not there. And they don't have something in common with their family members when they come back because they didn't share that experience with them. So the people that were with them on that deployment are the ones that they have something in common with, and the ones that they were able to share their experiences with and have that commonality amongst themselves, right? And that support system there, which is understood amongst each other, right? Operational stress injury victims need to process tough issues. At this stage, families, close associates, and the chain of command can help enormously by providing them with appropriate resources, support, and time to heal. I was watching that ship come in yesterday, and my favorite part of that whole thing is watching the military members reunite with their family members. It's really good to see that happening. What makes me very sad, and it's very hard for members coming home, is when they don't have that support system around them and they're coming home from a deployment and they don't have those family members there to greet them. Maybe it's because their support systems are in another location. We have a lot of people here whose family members are on IR, so they may be over and maybe they can't get out to greet them when they come off the ship. Or maybe their family, their support systems that they have, maybe they're not married and have a family, maybe they're single, right? And their support systems are on the other side of the country. So when they're returning from deployment, maybe they don't have those loved ones around them that can support them as somebody else would get supported when they return. So that's a part that can contribute to somebody struggling a little bit more than somebody else if they don't have that support system around them. And that is very individual. So that's not a general statement for all, that's more individual for anybody. That could happen to anyone, right? You could have all the support systems around you that you have and still not manage very well. So it's very, very unique and it's very individual to everybody. So let's get into, if you want more information on this, I have a lot of information in here, but I didn't want to go into all of that. I didn't want to get too down deep into all this information here. I can send you this information if you want it. It's not really in a PowerPoint presentation, it's more in a document. But I can send you, if anybody wants some of this information, let me know. I will send you some of the information from this document. It's from our Stress Take Charge Participant Manual. So I'm going to get into some of the things that can help. If you're somebody who knows that you're struggling with an operational stress injury and you have been to your medical officer and you have pinpointed something that you consider would be an operational stress injury, and you're someone who wants to develop effective ways to manage and make the best of the situation that you're in and be as healthy and quality of life that you can have, right? So just because somebody struggles or has depression, that doesn't mean they can't fully function properly, right? People who have depression and are taking care of themselves, or post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety or anything like that, as long as they're taking care of themselves, they have their support systems around them and they're following the advice of their medical officer or their social worker or their doctor, and they're taking steps, they can still do well and function and perform and stay in the military. And we have a lot of people who are still deploying and things like that. They may have some limitations potentially, or they may not. I've been around a long time now, 21 years, and I've had a lot of military members and friends who have disclosed to me that they struggle from an operational stress injury, and they're still full. They've done their 25 years and they're still doing more, right? So the key thing is early intervention and taking care of your health early, and recognizing some of these signs that you might see in yourself and taking care of it quickly so that you can bounce back and get back to work, right? So some of the ways that you can help and cope with an operational stress injury. So one of the first ones that they talk about is walk away from a trigger. So when you're triggered, try to identify what that trigger is and recognizing that that is a trigger, and look at your reactions to that trigger, and if possible, remove yourself from that. And then jumping over to another one, they talk about taking notes and journaling, right? So if you have figured out a new trigger for yourself and you've removed yourself from that trigger, you need to write that down. So you need to take notes of that, write it down in your journal, and write how you reacted to that situation, and then the strategy that you would have used in that situation. So if you got through it well and you used a strategy, write it down so you can keep track of these, right? So that's one of the things you want to be able to do, is to keep track of those situations in your environment that can be triggering. Making sure that if you are feeling triggered too, that you're using your therapy to cope with those triggers, and that you're using the strategies that you're in therapy, or your therapist or your counselor is giving you to sort of overcome some of those triggers, right? So you work hand in hand with your mental health professionals and your medical officers to do that. They will be able to give you those skills to face those situations. So exercise, I think we talk about this in almost everything that we do, but they do say if you get a chance, take a time to go for a walk. the benefits of regular walking can take you away from your environments into places where things can be more quiet for you and less triggering for you. It gives you also an opportunity to reflect and process things too as well. So if you can go for a walk and go somewhere quiet where you can reflect and process things, and you can journal and write those things down later, you're still keeping track of your health and your mental well-being. And any other type of activities that you want to engage in. Right now we have the calf pat going on, and I don't know if you've registered. It's never too late, but you can register on the CAF-PAT. Just Google that registration. You can go on there, track all your physical activity, especially if you're in Greenwood, even if you're somewhere else, but in Greenwood, track yours. I track mine once a week or once every 10 days. I just keep track on my Fitbit, and I go in there and I write in all my activities. Again, you're holding yourself accountable. You're tracking your minutes, and because it's sort of a challenge, we're challenging other bases. It's getting you to go in there and do that. It's getting you to move more. It's because you're kind of being competitive not only with yourself, but with other bases, right? So that's just a little tidbit there too as well. Another one is buying a pet. There's a lot of people out there now who are using, they're buying dogs. Oh, I forget the name of the dogs that they're buying. They're the therapy dogs. I'm not getting the right term for them, but they're dogs that are trained to be with you. They're therapy dogs, but if I'm getting the wrong term, feel free to write it in the comment box there. I know a lot of friends of mine who have them, and they come into the gym with them. You don't have to have a therapy dog or cat. I don't know if they have therapy cats or not, but just buying a pet in general, just buying a pet to have that unconditional love and acceptance and someone to be with you and someone to give you company is great. But don't take on a pet if it's going to give you more stress, because there is a commitment to looking after a pet. So if that's going to raise your stress level and add more stress to your life, or give you more things to do that are causing you to be overwhelmed, then don't buy a pet, because it is an increased responsibility. Take up a hobby. So hobbies do allow you to focus on other things, and it takes your mind away from any types of triggers or things that you might be thinking about. It's very fulfilling, and it can be very distracting for you. And make sure that you're picking out something that you enjoy. Kenny loves doing models. He does them all the time. That's what he does. That's his favorite thing to do. And he's tried to get me to partake in that, and I'm not having it. Right? It's not something I'm interested in. When I'm dealing with stress or I become overwhelmed, I got to pick the things that are going to be mine and are true to me and that are going to work for me. And that's what you need to do. Pick a hobby that's going to work for you, and have a conversation with your partner, your spouse, or your family, to let them know what you want to do and what the hobby means to you and how it's going to impact you, and that it's something for yourself. And if they want to partake in a different hobby, that's great. And if you want them to participate in the same hobby as you, then that's good too. Be patient with new medications. Many operational stress injury victims will resist taking medications that are prescribed by their clinician to help them cope with their symptoms. Remember that there is no shame in taking medications. Also, the effects of new medications can be unpleasant and intimidating. However, most side effects disappear with time. If they don't disappear, like any other medications, you would want to revisit your medical officer and have a conversation, or talk to your pharmacist for sure. Pharmacists are always underutilized, so use your pharmacist too as well. Be sure to discuss any of those side effects like I already mentioned. And just remember, it may take a delay for the full medications to take effect, or you may have to switch medications. It may not be the right medication for you, right? Avoid shopping during peak hours. I know a friend of mine doesn't like being out in crowds. He doesn't even like being in a room with a lot of people if he cannot get to an exit. Like if people are blocking his exit way, that is just, he has to remove himself from that situation. And he doesn't put himself in that situation either. So he'll go out and he'll shop, 9:30, quarter to 10, just before the stores are going to close. So if you work in retail, I've worked in retail, when people come in later at night, don't be so mean to them. Be nice, because sometimes they're coming in because that's the only time they can come in to shop, and it's probably the best time for them to come in to shop, right? Because of how they're doing, right? Crowds are very intimidating for many operational stress injury victims, so try to avoid that potential trigger like I already mentioned. I've already talked about taking notes, but you're taking notes of triggers, but you're also taking notes in your recovery, and you're recording situations that trigger you, and you're taking notes on how to establish these patterns of triggers, right? You're looking for different patterns because you could get yourself right in the middle of one, right? So you want to make sure that you're tracking, you're taking notes, and you're working with your therapists or your clinicians to making sure that the proper strategies are working and that you're actually using those strategies and practicing them and trying them out, right? It'll help you understand which situations will work for you and which ones to avoid. Keeping a journal, which I'd already mentioned, like those go hand in hand, like the walking away from triggers, the keeping a journal, and the taking notes, that whole piece, they kind of, well, it all goes hand in hand, but those two really come together, the two of them. I find with journaling too, it helps me go to Mount Crumpet to dump it. So I'm able to write things down and it takes it out of my head for a while. It gives me permission to think about it and then to put it down, and it gives me permission to put it away, right? And so when I go back to that, I can dump it again, give myself permission to feel it, and then put it away, right? It also gives you a chance to go back and see, like, how did I handle that situation last time? If you wrote down your strategies in there, you can revisit those and say, oh, right, this is what I'm doing in these situations and things like that. So you're keeping track of yourself and making sure that you do that, because that can be very helpful. Write your story if you want to. We've done a lot of success stories over the years, and I wish I had a list of all those success stories that we've done, because we've done success stories on people who have had post-traumatic stress disorder and who have gone through very difficult situations. Sometimes we find that people are attending our programs. So we've had people attend our Stress Take Charge, our Managing Angry Moments, our Intercom, our Addictions, all the different courses. We've had people attending. And one of the things we say at the beginning of all our courses is that these are education, prevention, information. And sometimes people may need more resources above kind of what you're getting within our programs. And then we find out that people are seeking, because we do talk about resources. And we do talk about the stuff like I'm talking about today is education, talking about the signs and talking about what you can potentially do and things like that. And when people look at those signs and they're looking at their lives and they're there because they could potentially want to find out more information about why they may be angry, or why they may have anxiety, or why they're struggling in their relationship, or why they can't sleep, or why parenting is hard, or why they're in conflict, or whatever the reason might be. They come into some of these programs, and it's like the gateway for that. It's like going over we're here to help them get over the bridge, to get over to the resources that they need to take them a little bit further on what's going on with them. And so sometimes when they go back to writing their stories, they'll tell us, which is great, they've started in some of our programs, and they said, I took a Managing Angry Moments program because I was finding myself angry all the time and withdrawing from my family and in conflict at work. And after taking that, I realized that I needed more than just education, and I went and saw my mental health professional or my medical officer, and I took my health by the reins, and I took things a little bit further, and I found out that I was struggling, and I have been diagnosed with PTSD or any other operational stress injury. And now I'm working through it, and I'm getting better. And they share their story about how they went from here to here. And what do you think that does for other military members, right? That is teeth for other military members. When they hear other people's success stories about how they went through something that was very difficult and how they managed to come out the other end, and how they got through this with their families and things like that. And they're pretty raw about it. They tell a good story, and people react and respond to those stories, and they react to those people and respond to those people, and they tend to sort of sometimes take it upon themselves to do the same thing. It's like anything else. It's like when you hear somebody who started a new fitness program, and you've been trying to want to start it for a long time, and they're talking to you about how they were struggling in the earlier stages, but once they started small, and this is what they did, and they understand, and they can empathize with you, and they can support you. It's really really helpful for other people to help them propel them forward into sort of taking action of their own fitness program. So I think these stories are really important. I think they hold a lot of value. So if you're brave and courageous enough and you want to share your story, I think it's great. It's also good therapy for yourself, for some, but check that out with your medical professionals first, like making sure that sharing your story is going to be helpful for you, because we don't want you to share your story if it's going to be harmful for you. So you got to really work with your medical professionals to make sure that if you're sharing your stories, and you could be recounting situations that could be very hard for you, right? So you have to make sure that you're guided through sharing your story. So before starting a project that big, discuss it first, okay? But if you can do that, I think that you can help a lot of other people. And I'm finding with a lot of the new videos that are coming out for us in a lot of our different programs, even if you go on the D1 and you go under health services, you'll see a lot of the different videos that are out there now. They're showing you different types of videos and who is talking in them. It's our Canadian Armed Forces members are talking about their own situations, their own stigmas and things like that, because I think that that's one of the best ways to get other military members to do the same thing, because we have that commonality, right? You have those things in common, and it can be very helpful. Find someone you trust for support. So having contact with somebody that you trust, who understands you and who does not judge you for your conditions, is critical for your well-being and your recovery. So while some operational stress injury sufferers have access to support from family members or co-workers, many do not, as I mentioned earlier. So one alternative may be to contact a peer support coordinator. So peer support coordinator or the operational stress injury support program. So here on our base, we have two people. So we have the operational stress injury social peer support program, and that is Kevin Therall. And I never pronounce his last name right, but it's Theriault, and that's Kevin. And then we have the operational stress injury social family support. So that's for family members who are living with somebody who may have an operational stress injury, right? And so the family needs to know how to cope and how to live with somebody who struggles like that, right? So they have that family support, and that is Tanya Rice. But we also have the GMFRC also have a couple of counselors over there. So they have, let me just get the right name. Let me get the right names. And I apologize if I don't get the right name. But we have Prevention Support and Intervention Coordinator for military families only, and her name is Caitlin Wolf. And then we have, I might get her title wrong, but I know that Erica Dion, she looks after family members of ill and injured soldiers. So if somebody has a physical injury or a mental health injury, Erica Dion counsels them. So you have all these different types of counselors over there, and you also have your mental health, who we have our 26 health services, and Captain McIsaac and his crew are over there, and you have all of those guys that you can talk to. So there's a lot of different resources out there that you would want to be tapping into. If you want to call somebody from home, then you can do that. There's CAFMAP, and you know I've talked about this before, right? You guys know this. So we have the Canadian Armed Forces Members Assistance Program, which is 24 hours. It's 1-800-268-7708, so you can call that. You get a counselor on the other end, and they can guide you and set up resources for you in your own community. If you're somebody who, I want to mention civilian employees too as well, because it could be family members living with a military member who is struggling with an OSI. So, and it could be people who are working on base as well. So for family members, you can call CAFMAP as well. For public servants, you can also call the same number, but it's called your Employee Assistance Program, but it's the same number as CAFMAP. And for our NPF employees on base, the number for us is 1-800-387-4765, because I'm an NPF employee and I used to be married to a military member, right? So if I need those supports, then I could call my own EAP program. You see what I'm getting at? So these are the different dynamics that go on. But if in doubt and you can't remember any of it, you can contact the health promotion office, because we know how to, one of the things that we do is we provide referral to people. So sometimes people will come in and talk to us, and we can decide or determine what resources might best fit for them. Right now, as you know, the gym is open, but our offices are out of bounds right now, but we're hoping to move into phase 2 in August, where we'll be able to see military members in the defense team, but I'm working on that. It's not open yet, but I'm hoping to get it open in August, and we're hoping to move into phase 3 in September. Anyway, I went into the resources quickly, but I thought while you're writing your story, I think it's really important that you know that what these resources are, and that you're using your resources while you're writing your story, and while you're finding someone to support you. And another thing too is just having that contact with other people who have been through something similar. So that's what OSIS is for. Okay, if you have other people who may be struggling with an operational stress injury, and you're coming together as a group and you have that support system. So that's what that's all about, right? They will come to your home as well. So I know that Tanya will go into the home and help people. Their numbers are, I'm not sure if they're in their offices or not right now. The local is 5136 for Kevin and 55086 for Tanya. I'm not sure if they're in their offices yet. But if you need to reach them and you can't get through with their local, let me know and I'll send out some emails for you. So make contact with ourselves. Jeanette has changed or she's in the process of changing our email addresses. Our Gmail, we still have them, but we're not using them anymore. We're using our ECN accounts. That's the new Office 365. And I think Jeanette's in the process of putting those on our Facebook page. Ugh. What time is it? Fitbit jingled. Okay, I've got a few more, and then we'll land the plane. We'll land the plane, park the tank, dock the boat. Is that the 3? Anyway, never mind. My jokes aren't that great. As you know, if you've been in my classes, you know they're not great. Okay. Read. So reading is another good way to take your mind off of other things. So there's some audio books out there. There's books that you can read. If you can find a book that you enjoy reading, it's highly recommended. This stuff is coming from a lot of veterans who've told us that this is some of the things that they do that helps them. So this is where some of this information is coming from that I'm giving you is they Strengthen the Forces talk to veterans, and this is what they've come up with, right? So reading has been good, but you just want to make sure you're not picking stories that are going to be triggering for you. It also makes you feel more in control, and it also takes your mind off of things that might be very respite. Set aside quiet time with your partner. So it's important, as we know, when we talk about intercom, and we've talked a little bit about that in some of the other videos. We know that it's important to have, and if you took any parenting courses, they would tell you the same thing, that it's important to have time as a family. That's important to have that family cohesion, that family unit. It's also very important for you to have that conflict-free time with your loved one, like with your partner or your spouse. Okay, have that conflict-free time, or conflict-free time with a friend or your children. So having that one-on-one time with your kids. So there's lots of different time compartments that we talk about. But when you can get that one-on-one with somebody and you remain conflict-free, you're not just. I know you have to schedule times to work through conflict and work through problems and things like that. I get that, and I know that you have to do that. But it's also equally important that you set conflict-free time aside for you and your partner and your kids, and making sure you have time especially for your own self too, that quiet time too. But getting some time with your partner, because what it does is it helps maintain your relationship, and you can share some of those things intimately with your partner to help them understand. And if they're working too through resources, like if they're working with family support systems through MFRC, you're working together as a family unit, and you're coming together and you're having that compassion, that understanding, that connection that you need. So if you can set some of this time apart, it can be very helpful. It also helps you not feel so alone in all of this too. A lot of OSI sufferers do suffer alone because they're not able to share all those things that they have inside of them with other people, right? Or they don't recognize some of the signs. They don't know why they're angry or why they're feeling down or why they're having nightmares or flashbacks or all these other things, all those other signs that I talked about earlier, and not reaching out and struggling alone. So that's a very hard place to be in, right? Withdrawn from other people. That's a very, very hard place for people to be in. So if you can get that cohesion and that intimacy and that connection with other people, then you're not feeling that you're alone. And I think that's for a lot of people in general, right? Get involved in volunteer work. So for many, volunteering with an organization that benefits others is a very fulfilling way to occupy their time. For many OSI sufferers, not being able to intervene or assist those they were sent to protect has significantly contributed to their injuries. Remember, I talked about this earlier. So volunteering can assist you to reestablish a sense of purpose and to help you help others and regain a certain level of control. And we know that our military members are very helping professions. Like when shit hits the fan, when something happens in our community, the first to jump are our military members. They're the ones that are always there to help. I see it all the time in our community, and it's happened to me. And Jeanette, plug your ears if you've already heard this, because or the other people is, and I'll give you an example of how they are helpful. Is my van completely broke down right in the middle of the road. I was coming out of the drive-thru from McDonald's, picking up my coffee in the morning, and I don't know, something fell right out of the bottom of my van on the ground. And there was a power truck coming this way, and there was another guy in a truck coming this way, and I was right in the middle of the road. Luckily, I didn't dart out there. I went out in time that there was time for everyone to stop, right? There's two guys behind me in the drive-thru, two cars with military members in it, and one guy in a uniform on his motorcycle who was just getting ready to leave. And those guys are the ones that jumped out of their cars and came onto the road to help me, right? They pushed my van onto the side of the road. They wanted to call a tow truck. They wanted to get me to work. They wanted to stay with me. They were very helpful. They are the one. And so helping other people is good for military members, and we as Canadians are very grateful to have the help of them. We're so very lucky. So one of the things they do say is if you can volunteer and you can go out and you can help others, it helps, especially if you're struggling with a moral injury. Remember, we talked about members who couldn't help someone else who was disadvantaged, or they see people disadvantaged all the time and there's nothing that they can do about it. But when they're in a situation where they can volunteer and help other people, that can be something that can help when they're dealing with an operational stress injury. Joining an activity group. So one soldier provided bowling as an example of many possible group activities. In his words, "I belong to the Monday Night Bowling League, a night out, opportunity to meet others, and a chance to relax and maybe have the mind think about bowling and scoring a good average, rather than thinking about the events which led to my operational stress injury." So that's one of the things that person likes to do. I know our bowling alley is closed right now, but we're hoping that it opens up in the fall. But bowling is another one. A lot right now, people are playing that game. Oh, I wish I could remember the name. It's when you throw those little things onto it. What's it called? They're little metal things, and you throw them in a box onto a little pole, and they're supposed to land on that. What's it called? Washer toss. That's it. So a lot of people playing washer toss or getting out, playing washer toss, croquet. I don't know if anyone knows what that is. That was back in the 80s. That's what we played in our backyard. We played croquet and getting outside and doing badminton out in your backyard. Get out in your pool. Get out to the beach. If you don't have a pool in your backyard, put your badminton up in the backyard. Throw a baseball. Throw a football. Get out and bounce a basketball. Our courts are open right now. I've seen people down there playing tennis and shooting hoops down there. So get out and do an activity that can take your mind off of that. And then last one in all of this, which is usually, excuse me, I need a coffee. Usually one of the first things we tell people whenever you're trying to change something, whether it's diet, exercise, or implement a healthier lifestyle of any kind, whether it could be sleep, it could be how to deal with an operational stress injury, it could be how to deal with parenting, it could be whatever it might be. Developing routine and structure is very important. And if you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. It's important that we get in a routine with our families, with our kids, and we have some structure. And as we go along and hit those bumps in the road, we deal with them. We write them down, we communicate, we try to find strategies that work, and if we can't do it on our own, then we reach out and look for other strategies that can help. Give yourself a reason to get up in the morning, especially if you're temporarily not working and staying at home, right? So this leads us all the way back to the very first video that I ever did when I was on here starting these live videos with Jeanette, is establishing a routine. And that is for anything our military members or anyone would have to do at any point in time when there's change. You know this. When you go on a deployment, you have a new routine, a new structure. When you go on a training course, new routine, new structure. Even when you move to another unit temporarily, or you go on a tasking, or you move from your PMQ to your house, or whatever it might be, there's always a routine and structure that you have to reestablish, and that's really important that you do that. And use your family members to help you with that. Use your chain of command. Use your medical professionals if you need them. And I don't know if I mentioned your family, but using your family, I think I mentioned that first. What that does is a routine can help. A routine is starting out with a walk in the morning is one of the things I mentioned, but a routine of a morning walk at a predetermined time would get you going in the morning, and the exercise would improve your state of mind and general overall mood. And that's just the routine of getting up in the morning and doing your walk. So remember a couple videos ago that was on sleep, and I talked about the importance of exposing your eyes to light first thing in the morning. So if you can do that, that's really good. If you can get out and get 60 minutes of exposing your eyes to light in the morning, that's good for sleep. So there's all these different things that Jeanette and I have been talking about. And we have had health promotion managers and specialists across the country working very hard on their Facebook page and their social media page, and doing these national webinars on CAF Connection. So if you were to go to CAF Connection and hit health promotion webinars, you will get a list of recordings that our other health promotion managers and specialists across the country have done. So there's so much education out there that you can combine together. I know it sounds overwhelming, but just take little tidbits from everything and start small. Like start little and start working on your journal. Start working on your story, right? And start using some of these things to help, whether it's exposing your eyes to light, whether it's getting out and doing a new activity, whether it's establishing a hobby, whether it's talking about it with somebody you trust, whether it's reaching out to a friend, whether it's calling one of the numbers that I gave you, whatever it might be. Start somewhere and build from that. And use your support systems to do that. So it's getting late. I think it's 5 to 11. So I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for anybody who's tuning in. Hi, Jill. Morning, sir. Hi, Paul. Hi, Lappy. Jeanette. Hi, Allie. Hi, everybody. I want to thank you so very much for tuning in today and being patient with me. I know I had to read a little bit here, but it's a subject that I didn't want to just ad-lib on. I wanted to make sure that I got my points correct. Thanks for tuning in. On Monday, I will be doing my Tuesday, I'm doing my Tuesday morning short because Monday is a holiday. It'll be at 10 o'clock, and it will be managing anger through forgiveness. And next Thursday at 10 o'clock, Jeanette will be doing safe party hosting. It's summertime. People are barbecuing. People are gathering now. We know it's not just about safe. We know about the safety, the social distancing and all that, but we're talking about when you're having alcohol or cannabis or things like that at your home and you're hosting a party, there's safety precautions that you should be taking into consideration so that you make your party safe for everybody. So she's going to talk about safe party hosting next Thursday. We've only got a couple of weeks of our Facebook Lives left. We're still going to continue to keep our Facebook page up and running, and we will still come to you live randomly, but the last couple of weeks of August, we're going to be taking some leave. And coming in September, if we're able to move into phase 3, if things go the way we want, we will be back in the classroom, which we're really excited about. We're going to be promoting 3 schedules soon. We're going to have a virtual schedule through MS Teams. We're going to have an in-classroom schedule, and we're going to have a Respect in the CAF schedule coming out soon. Probably my last Facebook post that I do will be the 16th of August, and I will give you, hopefully by then, I will know if our offices will be back in bounds by then, and if they're back in bounds, I will talk to you about how you can enter into the health promotion offices safely and what you need to do to reach out to us once we're able to see people in person. Right now we're still in phase 1/2 where we're not able to meet people in the gym yet, but we're hoping to move into that phase coming soon. So more to follow. Thank you everybody. Have a great day. Have a safe, great long weekend. It's always a pleasure to come to you, and I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. Have a great day. Bye.